Good evening. Earlier in the month it was the departure of Steve Wright, Radio 1's most prominent DJ, that put radio in the spotlight. This morning it was the publication of the latest audience figures, showing that Radio 1 has lost another 200,000 listeners to add to the 6 million the station shed last year. The really bad news though for the BBC is that they're not just turning off, they're turning over to new commercial outfits like Virgin 1215 and Classic FM. Commercial radio as a whole now boasts a bigger total audience in the BBC for the first time in its history, and with big profits suddenly to be made, next month sees further expansion with the launch of a third national commercial station, Talk Radio. It's already capturing headlines with its promise to introduce American-style shock jocks to Britain. So how did commercial radio, for so long the Cinderella of British broadcasting, finally get its act together? And does its success represent a continuing threat to the BBC?
It's 26 past 8.
Red light goes off, I go in. Stand by.
95.8 Capital FM, London's #1, Tuesday, 17th of January.
I think certainly the last couple of years, radio in this country has just come of age, really. I mean, it's becoming like a soap opera. I mean, some of the sort of headlines about, well, us and certainly like Virgin and Radio 1, I mean, it's become like the stuff of life now.
10 years ago, radio's image was comparable to that of the corner shop. I think now it's seen as a glamorous national advertising medium that is by no means a poor relation to television.
I think that the reason that the radio world is fizzing up is that you really can't put big new players like Lord Hanson and Richard Branson and lots of new capital into a market and expect everything to stay the same as it always was.
How long is the intro on this? Who cares? We're playing you only the hottest new songs, and we got this one out for you. It's called A Change by the Lightning Seeds.
Live at lunchtime.
Are you hungry for Lisa?
Last October, for the first time, commercial radio's audiences overtook the BBC's. Most of the new listeners came from a single source, Radio 1.
It is in the absolute teeth of the competitive gale. It's right at the place where all the commercial competitors are fighting for audience share. And the audience they're fighting for is Radio 1's audience. So it was absolutely clear that we had to get stripped down for action in Radio 1. In fact, over quite a long time, the Radio 1 audiences had been gradually drifting downwards and gradually drifting older. And I think if we'd let that go on, we would have been exposed to great danger. And so we decided that it was time for a pretty radical reinvigoration, and that's what's been going on.
We're coming from a position, of course, where the BBC was the only radio supplier. So the start point in this competition is BBC 100%, commercial radio nil. We've now moved, after 21 years, to a 50-50 situation, where in the last survey, commercial radio overtook the BBC. Now, a part of that process has been the preparation within the BBC for the Charter Review. And to my mind, they had absolutely no option but to reinvent Radio 1 in the way that it was reinvented.
It is true that there were many in the BBC who felt that had the Thatcher government continued, then Radio 1 would be a candidate for privatisation. And don't forget that in 1986, the Peacock Committee actually recommended privatising both Radio 1 and Radio 2. So the loss of audience is something that Radio 1 in particular regarded as a price worth paying for repositioning itself and becoming different and distinctive. The trouble is, Radio 1 did all these things very, very quickly.
I don't think there was any alternative unless the BBC was prepared to see Radio 1 privatised. Because otherwise, previously, Radio 1 was doing exactly what the commercial sector was doing. There was no argument for it to take licence payers' money.
Whatever the reasons for the audience shift, the effect on commercial radio has been dramatic. 6 million new listeners in just 2 years. But the latest figures released yesterday show that Radio 1's decline has slowed down.
What I said when I took over Radio 1 and began making changes to it was that it would take about a year for Radio 1's audience to stabilise. And I think we've seen in the latest audience figures that have been published very strong signs of that happening. Just a small loss of audience quarter on quarter at a time when there are 150 approximately ultimately commercial radio services up and down the land competing in different ways with the BBC, and it's become much more difficult to work out how audiences will flow from one to the other. And there are a number of factors which influence people's behaviour. And one of those is that commercial radio has been becoming more and more profitable and therefore able to spend more money on marketing.
You can't be too careful when you've got this much dosh in your briefcase. Tune in to 95.8 Capital FM. But you're talking about very serious business. I mean, I think it used to be a bit of a gentleman's club and people used to amble in and sort of put nice little tunes on, more or less whatever they fancied. And it's become terribly serious now. I mean, the profits involved in the commercial side of it are, you know, as much as an awful lot, or more than an awful lot of television stations. I mean, talking about Capital Radio declared £22.9 million last year. I mean, that is serious money.
A key element in the revival of commercial radio has been the launch of national stations.
Good afternoon, Virgin. Can I help you?
Virgin 1215 providing rock music for 20 to 44-year-olds.
On Saturday, but there's ballet there this evening.
And Classic FM playing light classical music for upmarket audiences.
And South Walsham in Norfolk.
This is Long Wave Radio, Atlantic 252.
From a country house near Dublin, a third unofficial national station, Atlantic 252, avoids British broadcasting restrictions and plays carefully selected pop music across the UK.
20-1, Nirvana unplugged in New York at 20.
And February the 14th will see the launch of Talk Radio UK, a 24-hour national talk station.
Good afternoon, Talk Radio UK.
Most advertising agencies would say that radio is definitely the glamour medium of the moment. That's really only happened in the last 2 years, and I think there are a number of reasons for its sudden, meteoric rise in advertising share. The first of those reasons would be the arrival of the new network commercial radio stations, particularly Classic FM.
The one that caught everybody napping actually was Classic, because nobody really expected sort of Henry Kelly and a few bits of Chopin to actually do very well. And it did far better than anybody expected.
The success of Classic FM had an impact that was really very widely felt, and one of the reasons for that was the fact that our success was a surprise. That caused people to reassess the medium. It slightly disturbed preconception about radio.
Classic FM, delivered fresh every morning.
For about 2 decades, radio languished really at the bottom of the rankings in terms of the share it took of advertising. It was always about 2%. What we've seen in the last 2 years is radio doubling that share of revenue to about 4%. If you look at other European markets, you will see radio taking up to 10% of all advertising. I see no reason why radio won't continue this extraordinary rate of growth. As long as the audiences continue to tune in more and more, then advertising revenue will grow.
The road around there is all flooded. In Devon, there's some flooding.
With its confidence renewed, the commercial radio industry is promoting itself with an aggressive national advertising campaign which started last week.
Now then, you're right, Bill Boy here, and these lads what work in advertising with their ponytails and their day-glow glasses, they can make us buy out we don't want, can't they? They don't put their brass just anywhere, but on a winner. So when I tell you that in 1993, money spent on advertising grew by 4%, but money spent on advertising on commercial radio grew by 24%, that's 6 times as much. And in 1994, the growth accelerated. What does that tell you?
That sort of an improvement in percentage terms represents potentially over £100 million of cash coming into the industry. And with that sort of potential opportunity being available, clearly it's commercially very attractive. The national stations have provided advertisers with the opportunity of buying one product across the whole country, a lot of listeners in one go, and also they buy the stations from just one point. You know, you just talk to one station to buy however many million listeners across the whole of the UK. And it's also attractive from a listener's point of view. I mean, from Atlantic's field here in Ireland, we're able to broadcast right the way across the UK, and all the other stations, Classic, Virgin and Talk, when they come on, also provide a service which listeners can travel all around the country and still listen to.
In the past, the commercial radio industry had dozens of small players, with each local radio station being owned by a different company. But the 1990 Broadcasting Act loosened up ownership rules.
Since 1990, there has been a considerable consolidation in the industry, and what was a very fragmented industry in terms of ownership has become much more coherent. There's been the creation of a number of coherent radio groups, which I see as being so crucial a part of continuing success. And it's interesting to note that amongst the new, some of the new players in radio, we're seeing some very large media companies like Time Warner, CanWest, TeleWest, starting to get involved in this media.
Heart FM is a brand new radio station dedicated to...
Heart FM in the Midlands is owned by one of the newest players in radio, the Chrysalis Record and Broadcasting Group, who also plan to launch a second station in London this year.
In 1989, we're looking at television as an area for us to expand into. We got involved as part of that in the ITV Channel 3 franchises, and it was whilst I was looking at the franchise application process that I obviously came across what was then seen to be a Cinderella medium, namely radio. And it immediately struck me as a business that perhaps had quite a lot of opportunity for us.
It's now big business. It's not a little boy's game, it's a big boy's game. The city has taken to commercial radio very well over the last couple of years. The returns investors are getting are terrific. And it's now grown up, if you can put it like that, in corporate terms.
Fixed costs in radio are really quite low. You have to cover the costs of the studio, cover the costs of the presenters, and obviously you have to cover royalty payments for the music you transmit. But after that, something like 85% of incremental revenue feeds directly through into increased profits. That's really what's been fueling the tremendous growth in the share price of the radio station groups that we've seen in the last 12 months.
And we're now in the programming area, which is a hive of activity at the moment, as the producers are bedding in and the presenters are joining as well. Hell of a hive. Hi, Scott.
One of talk radio's much-hyped promises is to bring to Britain the American tradition of shock jocks, talk show hosts who are deliberately confrontational.
Dan Ehrlich, our dangerous Dan. I think Sunday mornings, Dan.
The American, yes, the American shock jock.
Thank you. The type of presenters you'll get on Talk Radio UK will be as varied as Jeremy Beadle through to Scott Chisholm. So you've got a popular television entertainer there, together with a hard news journalist in Scott from Sky Television and various other places, together with an off-the-wall late-night presenter, Caesar the Geezer. So there really is something for everybody, but there will be a vein running through all programming, which is one of entertainment, irreverence, confrontation, yes, to some degree.
Just going up to 9:45.
As the competition hots up, big-name personalities are becoming increasingly important, as demonstrated by the media coverage of Steve Wright's departure from Radio 1. Today, Chris Tarrant is the hottest property in radio's crucial slot, breakfast time.
All your energy, all your money, all your investment, everything has to go into breakfast. I mean, that's just the way it works. You catch an audience in the mornings because that's the best time for radio audiences. People are running around the house, they haven't got time really. I mean, GMTV and stuff have not done that well in this country. They're getting an audience, but you haven't really got time to sit down and watch this stuff. So radio is there, it's in that room, it's in that room, it's in your car. And I think obviously as our cities get more and more and more congested, you know, radio in the morning at breakfast time is becoming more and more and more important. And of course it's very important to advertisers. People are lying there with one eye open, you know, coming around in their motor cars in a traffic jam or whatever, and they're waiting to be, you know, sold commercials.
Thank you.
Still taking your calls this morning, 25 past 9, 07148. Oh, sorry, 0171 45255. I stand correct.
Everyone listens to radio at breakfast time. People don't listen to radio very much in the evening, but everyone listens to radio at breakfast. And that's where competition is at its fiercest, and that's why Chris Tarrant and people like that earn very, very large sums. In the case of Chris Tarrant, who presents the most popular programme on the most popular station in the capital and has the lion's share of listening, he earns £504,000 a year.
I keep reading that, yes. Come on, they declared £22 million profit last year.
It's amazing what people will do to get their hands on my dosh. Tune in to 95.8 Capital FM from 7 till 10.
It's going to get more serious as well. I mean, the next few years, I mean, it's going to be like, you know, the main radio presenters and hopefully one or two sort of new hopefuls as well will be paid very large sums of money. I mean, it's exactly what's happening in football, in sport, whatever. I mean, and that's happened to commercial radio, and inevitably that will rub off on the Radio 1s and the other radio stations. If they're going to attract people, you know, they're going to have to pay them, basically.
One of the consequences of the arrival of tremendous new competition has been to force up the price of certain things in radio, including the price of key stars at head-to-head competitive times like breakfast time. I think it's a disappointing feature of this explosion of competition in the marketplace that really the overall amount of listening to the radio has remained pretty static. In something like, I suppose, 21 years of commercial radio, they haven't added a single listener to the total number of people who listen to the radio. What they have done is targeted the BBC's audiences. I think that's a sad thing.
The problem for the radio industry, including the BBC, is that what it means is that no one can start a radio station and make fresh listeners. You only get listeners by taking someone else's away. Everyone is scrabbling around in a pot that remains the same size, and that is clearly a problem because it means frenetic, frantic activity and the marketplace not increasing overall.
It's a very interesting question about whether this attack on the BBC's audiences can continue. I think that although the total amount of competition will grow and go on growing, I think we are coming to a point where the commercial stations will start to cannibalise each other's audiences.
And Talk Radio goes on air on the 14th of February.